front rows. I ask this not because I want you all to be exposed and spotted by everyone, but because our screen this year is smaller than screens we've had in previous years, and we are trying to expand the size of the fonts on the presentations we're giving so that you can actually read them. But the closer you are to the front, the better the chance you're going to have of being able to read small type on a small screen. So that is my request for you. My second point, I have messed up a little bit. I did not, I should have made it clear to you, as you have seen, all of you have seen, that I futz around and I talk to people and I tick you off on my list. I'm afraid this has meant that some people think they don't have to sign in on Jim's list. Jim is our training officer. He tries to keep track of all the classes that you've been to. So when the blue plastic document holder comes around, please sign in on it. Do not skip that part. Third thing, Bill Prestridge brought some limes in. They're on the counter with the muffins and stuff. So if you wish to take some limes from Bill's tree, you may take them. David.
You were talking about asking folks to sit near the front so you can see easier. We did a little screen test a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who are going to be doing presentations, we found that if you make all of your captions in 24-point type or larger, they can be read from the back of the room.
Yes.
If people are sitting closer, they don't need to be quite that big, but to be read from the back of the room, 24 points seems to be a pretty good size.
Yes, did you hear that? 24 point for preference if you can do it, so that you can read it. David Berg had something he wanted to say. David?
Back up. We're on schedule here.
Okay.
Okay, is this volume better?
Yes.
I'm speaking on behalf of Ken Golden. He is the docent who organizes the onboard docents for the sailings when we sail Californian and San Salvador. He would like the new recruit docents to know that you're welcome to come along during some of those, but you need to sign up with him. And then it will be on an if there's space available, which there almost always is. We almost never sell out. So there will be 1 or 2 spaces available per trip, in addition to the 2 docents that are already assigned to those trips. Okay. The thing is, okay, his email is kengolden@gmail.com. KENGOLDEN@gmail. So contact him through that email address and ask to be put on some of the trips. This will not count as a shadow tour. Okay? But it will be necessary for you to shadow on a couple of trips before Ken is satisfied that you're ready to do it on your own. Is that what you wanted to say?
No. What I wanted to say was that in previous years we have been told in no uncertain terms that trainees have to have passed our written exam before they can go as guests on board the TSAs. So sorry about that, chaps, but when you've passed the exam, go to it and it will be Ken Golden you'll speak to.
Right. And so that will be available to you starting in March. There are only 3 of those trips scheduled for the month of March. And I think there will be only 2 that will be...
The exam won't be till April. So
Oh, April?
Yeah.
I may be speaking too early on this.
As a matter of fact, you are.
Okay, over to you, Jim.
Good morning. How's everything going so far? Good. I don't know how many of you were at our Saturday night town hall, but that was very fun, informative. Chance to get to meet everybody and socialize. So when those events come up, try and make them. One of the questions I've been getting is how do you get a copy of the Shadow Tour sign-off sheet? Now, we sent it to you by Word, we sent it to you by PDF, but I've also just printed out copies to make it simple. They'll be right here on the corner of this table. If you haven't printed one out yourself and you need one, feel free to grab one, okay? But these are essential that you bring with you when you do your shadow tours. Margaret's already covered the second thing I wanted to mention is that be sure to sign yourself off on the blue clipboard that floats around. If you haven't done it again, it's over here on the corner, and that's how we keep your official attendance. And that's important that you sign in for class. Thank you. Yes. Oh, and Volgistics, Bob's going to talk about. Anybody have any questions this morning? Rich Wolf? Where are you, Rich? You were here a minute ago. All right. Well, Rich has got a couple shadow tours coming up. Huh? No, Rich.
That's it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't. The light is behind you.
No.
Yeah.
We're looking
So
for Rich.
anyway, we're the next one is what, on the February 15th?
Next one is the 9th, which is this coming Sunday, 9 a.m. at the ticket booth. I already have 3 victims signed up. And the next one is the following Sunday at the same time, 9 a.m.
Okay. 9 a.m. on Sunday at the ticket booth. Sign up in advance. Rebecca has put it up on the Volgistics page, and Bob's going to tell you how to get into that. There's a separate sign up for the shadow tours. So be sure you do that, but also get the tour guide leader to sign off on your sheet, because that's how you get to the point of graduation. Don't put it off. We only have, at present time, Rich and Bob volunteering to do shadow tours. You need 3 different tour guides to be able to fulfill the requirement. So do it early and get Rich and Bob, and then the third one will.
Do it early, do it all.
Thank you.
Yeah, my sign-up sheets are over there.
And Bob has sign-up sheets over there. Bob has also printed off 9 or 10 more copies of the Docent manual. First come, first serve. It's out of his pocket, by the way. The printing costs have gone up to $50.
Actually, 40, still 45.
Oh,
I got an extra discount though.
now I have to go back and correct it again. Okay, $45 for a Docent manual. Be sure to pay Bob. It comes out of his pocket. He's doing this out of the kindness of his heart. And if we get any other people that want to lead shadow tours, please let me know. We need a couple more people.
I'll do it this Saturday.
Well, okay. This Saturday, where?
Here.
Where do they meet you?
At the ticket booth, 10 o'clock.
At the ticket booth, 10 o'clock. Thank you. Here's a rather general term. All right, okay, so Bob's going to talk to you about Volgistics.
You're done, right? It's okay.
All right, can you hear me okay? All right. Yeah, well, it's only taken us a couple of years to figure out that every time we turn this thing on, you have to turn the volume up. So that's trying to do this. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about the, let me get my computer set up here. It's called Vic Touch. This is actually the data entry for you folks to sign in and to sign out. And the reason that we want to do this is it is very, very important that we record all of our volunteer hours. One reason is that we get money depending on if we can do matching with our grants. I think the going rate now is somewhere between $20 and $30. How much? $42.87. Inflation has hit us. So we need that. The second reason that we want to make sure you're very, very accurate and conscientious with your recording of your hours is that's how we recognize your service. And it also allows us to do rewards. So when we have volunteer appreciation, you can stand up and you'll be recognized for your service at that time. The third reason that we want people to sign in is it's an acknowledgement of that you are actually at the museum, because there are some conditions that we may need from an emergency standpoint to evacuate everybody, and we need to know who's signed in. And there's actually part of logistics that the management here can use that says who's here. And so we want to make sure that we especially sign out so that if all of a sudden there's some type of emergency situation, they're not going to go off and look for you because you actually had already signed out. So I'm assuming you can see my screen there. Okay, good. All right. So the first part we're going to talk about is how do you get into the volunteer center to start this whole process. And there's a number of ways that you can do this. The first one is actually everyone has been given one of these little cards. If you do not have one of these cards, get one from Rebecca. It will have your name on it. It will have a number. That is your number and only your number. And you can see here this one has a little QR code on it, like that. All right? But probably the most important thing there is to know what your number is, because if you lose this card and you don't have that QR code, there are other ways to get in. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Yeah, no, please don't do that. All right.
Volunteer of the year in no time.
So, one way that you can do this is right at the ticket booth. We have a kiosk there. It has an iPad, and we actually have a little the listing there of your of the code. So if you walk in there and say, "I don't have my QR code with me. I can't remember what the number is," you will actually there's a whole listing of them there. Now, I don't know if we have it updated with the trainees at this point, so it may need to have a periodic update from that standpoint. But if you can look at here, you can see that that is exactly what I was showing on my screen before. It looks the same. Another way that you can log in is, just like I was doing here, is I could actually scan my card. Let me do that. With my camera. Hello. There we go. And there it is. It's the same interface regardless of how you do this. Now, one of the ways that I found that works really, really well for me is if I always lose my card or can't find it in my wallet or wherever it is, I made a photo of my card. And it's in an album, almost by itself. And what I can do is tap on that QR code, and it will launch in the same thing will launch in there. So in other words, you can do this anywhere you want, right? But the most important thing is to have some type of idea of when you're going to log in. One of the things that I learned, because I'm always quite forgetful, is as soon as I take the keys out of the car, before I even leave the car, I pull up either this or the QR code and sign in at that point. When I leave, before I put the keys in the ignition, I do the same thing. So you have many, many options to do that, but it's important that we sign in and we sign out. Now today I decided not to sign in so I could show you what the numbers look like. So I actually have to go back and remember what my number is. So the first thing you're going to need to do is put your code in. and it's going to ask you what your name is. And of course, this is yes. And the first part of this is sign in. Now, I'm going to skip over that just real quickly because probably next week or the week after that, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can view your schedule and view your service. It actually works here right in the touch version or in the VikeNet. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But right now, what we want to do is you want to sign in, and now you have assignments. Now, I have a large number of them because I do a lot of variety of different things. But one thing we've done here is all of the docent activities are, since these are all done in alphabetical order, are all loaded at the same time. So you can see we have docent meetings and docent San Salvador. Here's our docent shadow tour we were talking about, right? And docent tours, and then docent training. So if you are a trainee, you would tap on docent training. If you are already a docent, you would tap on, for today, docent meetings. I'm going to do that, all right? I'm fabulous, okay. All right, so that's all you need to do to start off this thing. It'll keep track of your hours, and then when you leave, or about ready to leave, is when you want to sign out. And it's very, very important that you sign out because if you don't, it'll probably stop after about 4 hours, but you won't get any travel time, etc. So if I just say I'm going to sign out right now, it's going to ask me for my round trip travel, and it's in hours and in minutes. And you're done. And that's all it takes. That's to be accurate and reliable about that. So next time we talk, which will probably be next week, we're going to talk a little bit about how we always use this for scheduling. And we want to try and get this for all the docents, not just the trainees. And we'll also talk about a little bit about how we look at this for service, etc. But that's it for now. So for the docent trainees, I would like you to, this is your homework assignment, actually it's your day work assignment, is I'd like to make sure all of you have signed in for today. And if you haven't signed in for today yet, use the docent training assignment. And if you have any problems with any of that, let us know. But in the meantime, just go ahead and do it, and don't forget to sign out. All right, any questions? Okay.
If you forget to sign in or out, can you retroactively set the time, or does it set based on when you click that button?
Okay, her question is, if you forget to sign in and sign out, is there a way to do retroactively logging your hours? And the answer is yes, and it would be through what we call VikeNet, which is kind of this conversation we'll have next week. And what this is, just to complete the answer though, is if you go onto the website, you'll see something that says, I think this is VikeNet portal. You click on that and you'll go into a thing where you need to give your username, which will be your email, and your password. Now, for all of the trainees, you've been given a temporary password so that the very first time that you log in, that will be used, but it will prompt you to change to a proper password at that point. And then you can go in there and do that. I'll show you what that all looks like next week. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Uncle Jim.
In the event that you walk up to the guard shack and it is locked, on the outside of the door to the left of the door is a copy of that barcode. So you can use your phone to kiosk on that and open it up without having to go in.
What he's saying is that there is another way we can do this besides your own QR code or the kiosk, or like I do with my photo, and that is they have what we call a mobile QR code. And it's right at the end of the door. We used to have them around other places here, but I don't know if there are any other places. But that, you know, when all else fails, you got that. As long as you remember your volunteer number. Okay? Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Doug
Doug,
Phillipson.
you left for the day.
Doug Phillipson. I knew you were here. Okay, we're going to shift our training to specific ships from this point pretty much on through the rest of the training. Each day we'll be covering one or two of our ships that are also covered in your docent manual. These presentations are to help enrich you, to bring that information to life. Doug will be talking about the HMS Rose. How many of you know which ship was the Rose? A few of you. Well, it's also known as the HMS Surprise, which will be our second talk today because the ship changed its name due to interesting circumstances. So Doug's going to talk about the early years of the HMS Rose.
Thank you, Jim. How's the volume? Okay, then I'll just stick with this. No, I'm going to use this and this. Okay, so thank you. My talk is about the Rose, which was a 1957 ship of the British Admiralty, and tell you a little bit.
Remove any smouldering remnant of the felt cartridge of the previous shot. Once the worming is completed, the gun will be sponged or swabbed by using a thoroughly wetted sponge, which will then finally extinguish any smouldering remnants remaining in the gun barrel.
Is that fresh water?
Yes.
The gun is now ready to be loaded, and a pre-made felt powder cartridge will be brought to the gun in a leather powder canister by a powder monkey. This will be inserted into the barrel mouth along with a wadding, which was often a section of hawser tied off and cut into appropriate sections. This would all then be rammed home. You may have noticed me using my thumb to close the vent hole or touch hole during ramming or sponging. This is another means to make sure that any smouldering embers lingering in the barrel will die. A round shot would now be inserted into the barrel mouth, along with a wadding, and this again to be rammed home. Before the advent of priming quills, the gun captain would prime the gun with a powder horn. However, during the Napoleonic era, goose quills were prepared and priming powder was inserted into them, which made a ready-to-use priming charge, which was then inserted into the vent or touch hole. But before that, the main charge has to be pricked using the reamer. The gun is now ready to be primed, and in this case, with a small model, it'll be primed by using fine powder in the small ladle. The gun is now fully loaded and ready to be fired. On the instruction of the gun captain, the gun would be run out. In its run-out position, the gun's traverse could be altered by using hand spikes and manhandling the gun in this fashion. Similarly, the gun's elevation would be altered by using hand spikes as well, and then adjusting the elevation point once the suitable position has been found. The gun is now fully ready to fire, and the gun captain would discharge the piece with his flintlock mechanism.
Yes, old gunner does a much better job than me of telling us how to load and fire our guns, which, by the way, occurs on the TSA on the Californian and the SSSA on the San Salvador twice every time they sail. So it's really a delight. The guests love it, and I never get tired of it myself. So, without further ado, let's switch to 1970, where I believe the Rose replica story is the story of two guys. In 1969, John Millar had this idea, wouldn't it be nice to make 5 tall ships for the bicentennial? And of course the problem was he didn't have any money. But he went to Smith and Rutland in Nova Scotia, and they said, okay, No safety equipment, no engines, you know, no sails, no rigging. $250,000 for one ship. He said, okay. He still didn't have any money. He went to a bank and they said, what's your collateral? And he said, well, the ship, of course. He said, it's not built yet. But apparently his grandfather had started the bank, so that was good enough for them. And in terms of stepping up, you know, sailing, modern sailing companies, the Samson Company donated 5 miles of rigging line. And the copious sails were made by Hood Sails for sails. In 90, they toured the Great Lakes. Rose was American Coast Guard certified as a sailing school vessel. In 91, toured the East Coast from Maine to Florida, and I love this, displaying Rhode Island's original draft of the Bill of Rights. In 93, she was the largest of 5 tall ships in the Sail Racine benefit event, and I have a slide on that. 2000, she sailed in Opsail 2000 from Puerto Rico to Maine. And during this time, under Captain Bailey, she was also a sail training vessel and a tall ship ambassador, where you could be one of 30 paying attendees and get 2 weeks on board. This picture of Kay Williams. This is a picture of the Rose undergoing renovation. She's floating. I don't know how they did that. I would be worried, but anyway, you know, to each their own. A nice blank slide. Anybody recognize that harbor? Bridgeport, Connecticut. Exactly. These are some shots from the Sail Racine meet. And I want to emphasize, as David Clark reminds us often, these are time capsules, these ships that we have. They allow us to go back in history and see what it was like. So this paper ran 12 stories in 5 days, and here's just some examples of the news clippings. Then for Opsail 2000, we actually have pictures. From Philadelphia and New York. And the participants included not only the Rose, but our Californian, among many other ships. That's why if you get a chance to do some spectating with the Sail 250, I think it'd be worthwhile. So, little word about ship's bells. Why does our surprise bell still say Rose? Anybody? Bad luck to change a bell on a ship. Same thing on the Star. If you look at the bells, you'll see the word Euterpe, or the name, her first name. Also, nobody can read this, right? The surprise history slide. Anyway, it's still up, and I want you to help me correct the date. The Rose was a 24-gun frigate built in, bingo. All right, that's the end of my talk, and I have time to spare, so I'm going to torture you for just a second with a bad dad joke. Simon will forgive me. So, the conversion of the Rose to the Surprise took place in Southern California using a very, very special wood.
And actually, this is my first year. So yes, you get thrown into it. And when Jim first asked me to do a presentation, boy, did I whine big time, but he's very persuasive, so I'm here. So I'm going to talk to you all about HMS Surprise, but before I do that, I have a few questions. By a show of hands, how many of you watched Master and Commander? Oh, perfect. All right. How many times? Yeah, okay. How many of you have watched the Hornblower series, the BBC series with Ian Ruppert, by a show of hands? Better. How many of you have read some or all of the Patrick O'Brien books? This talk's going to go well. And finally, not that importantly, how many of you have read pages 106 through 125 of our manual? Yeah. We're not going to talk about that today. I'm not here to repeat what's there. What I am going to do is I'm going to talk to you about what a frigate is, because our Surprise is a frigate. I'm going to talk about the British Navy around the 1800s. I'm going to talk about Master and Commander. So let's see here. And bear with me, this is my, there we go. So our Surprise is a frigate. And I want to talk about the evolution of the frigate. They were originally ships that had 1 and like 1.5 gun decks, but the French, who were very good at building fast, maneuverable ships, starting with a ship called the Midi, built a frigate that had just 1 continuous gun deck. And they eliminated the lower gun deck. That lower deck got turned into berthing areas. So when you go aboard our Surprise, you'll see the museum's built a gun deck, but it's not continuous. It should go from port to starboard and from bow to stern. The captain's cabin on a continuous gun deck frigate was separated by partitions. When there was action, those partitions would be taken down and the deck cleared for action. In Master and Commander, there's a wonderful scene where they're getting ready for action, and 2 crew members go back to clear up Captain Aubrey's cabin, and they say, be careful, and just as they're saying be careful, a broadside comes in and knocks them all over. But the advantage of the continuous gun deck frigate is they were able to lower the actual height of the ship, and they made it faster and more maneuverable. They started out around 20 guns, but over time got to 32 to 36 guns. They started out with 9-pounder guns, which was a gun that could shoot a cannonball weighing 9 pounds. That increased to 12 pounds, and eventually the British had a standard frigate of 18 guns. Their heavy frigate had 36 guns. The Americans went one better. Their frigate, the Constitution, had 24-pounder guns. Oh, there we go. So frigates were the workhorse of the Royal Navy. They were fast, powerful for their size, used for scouting, commerce raiding, convoy escort, and very importantly, for taking prizes. We're going to talk more about prizes. That was a big incentive in the Royal Navy. They were the eyes of the fleet. For those of you with Navy experience, and I know there was quite a few hands, the World War II equivalent would have been something like the Fletcher-class destroyer. They were fully rigged, 3-masted ships. For those 1 or 2 who haven't seen Master Commander, it's a wonderful movie starring Russell Crowe, received Academy Awards. For those 1 or 2 who haven't read the Patrick O'Brien books, there are a wonderful series of books that describe life in the British Navy. I'm going to advance now, and I want to talk about the British Navy. At the time of our Master and Commander, Britain was a world naval power. She had the largest navy in the world. Her goal was to have a navy equal in size to the next 2 nations. She had 120 to 140 ships of the line, and I'll explain in a minute what a ship of the line is. She had 150 to 170 of our fast frigates. She had hundreds of smaller ships. Her personnel was anywhere from 120 to 140,000 at the height of the British Navy. And you heard some talk about press gangs, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time about press gangs because the Royal Navy could never get, through voluntary recruitment, enough bodies to man all their ships. So let's talk about ships of the line. These were, again, going back to those Navy of World War II, these were the battleships of the Royal Navy, the very largest, and the British called them rated ships. First rate, second rate, third rate, and so on. I'm not going to repeat all the numbers here, but the first rate would be the largest ship, would carry 100 to 112 guns. HMS Victory was a first-rate ship, captained, or actually commanded by Lord Nelson. And I'm going to refer to Lord Nelson because he figures prominently in the British Navy of the 1800s. He also figures prominently in the movie Master and Commander. You can see there's various rated ships after this. The 5th and the 6th rated ships, those were our frigates, anywhere from 30 to 44 guns for a 5th rate and 20 to 28 guns for the 6th rate. A lot of attention is paid to the weight of a broadside that a ship can throw. So HMS Victory, a first-rate ship, her broadside was in excess of 1,100 pounds. Our Surprise, the weight of her broadside was 126 pounds. When you go on the Star of India, if you haven't done so already, when you go down to the 'tween deck, on the starboard side, there's a beautiful model of the HMS Victory. And right next to that model is a diorama of the Battle of Trafalgar. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the Battle of Trafalgar for a couple of reasons. Oh, there we are. So, in the age of fighting sail, there were a variety of tactics involved. I'm going to go through those. Let's see if I can get this pointer to work. Maybe not. Well, you can see on the screen in front of you, on the right side, there's a series of ships vertically, and then there's a couple lines of ships horizontally. In the age of fighting sail, the traditional battle was each side lined up their ships in a line, and they'd have a go at each other. We heard some talk earlier about rate of fire. The British were, because they were engaged in blockading duty out on their ships all the time, they could typically fire 1 to 2 broadsides more than the enemy in a given engagement. There's a wonderful scene in Master and Commander where they observe the French frigate, and he says to his crew, we have to be able to fire 2 broadsides for their every one. But there's a variety of tactics in the age of sail here, and I want to talk about them. One is the weather gauge. And what does that mean? That means you have the wind at your back, your opponent is downwind. In these old ships, they didn't have engines, they just had sails, and these old sailing ships could not sail very close to the wind. So if you had the wind at your back, you could dictate, first of all, whether there was going to be a battle, and secondly, when the battle was going to occur. Another tactic, and in this picture here of the Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson, I really would like to get that pointer working, but maybe not. Nelson's in the top row, and his ship is the Victory, and he did not want to follow the traditional line of battle with each ship lined up, so he came up with a unique strategy of having 2 columns break the French and Spanish line. And you can see this picture is them approaching the French and Spanish line. His ship is in the top horizontal column, right at the front, and he's heading for the French commander of the entire French-Spanish squadron. Another tactic is called raking. Yes?
Where's the wind? Do you know?
The wind is coming, good question, yes. The wind is coming from the left to the right. That's why Nelson had the weather gauge. But thank you for that, something I forgot to mention. One of the tactics was, in a line of battle, yes, you exchange broadsides and each ship is tracking the other, and if you hit the opponent, you'll take out a cannon or 2. But if you know what you're doing, you can sail around your opponent's stern, where all those big windows are for the captain's cabin, and you let loose a broadside. If you can do that, you can cause far more damage because your cannonballs will go down through that nice window and go down the length of the ship, taking out all cannons along the way. And in the Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson was able to sail Victory right behind the French ship, Bucentaure, and they had their cannons double and treble loaded. That means instead of a 32-pound ball or a 24-pound ball, they had 2 of them. And they let loose a terrible broadside. And that first broadside, they killed and wounded hundreds of French sailors, blew a big hole in the back of the French command ship, and effectively took her out of the battle. I also talk here about canister because in addition to firing round iron balls, you could also fire a canister shot. That would be a bag filled with musket balls. If you're interested in taking a prize, that is capturing a ship, instead of firing iron balls, you might fire what's called bar shot or chain shot. That's 2 iron balls joined by a chain or joined by a bar, and that's designed to take out the rigging so you can capture the ship. I also refer here to fighting tops. And again, when you go on the Surprise, you're going to see those. Those are the horizontal platforms about halfway up the mast. And during a battle, you would have your sharpshooters up on that mast to take out the officers of the other ship. And the officers would tend to congregate on the quarterdeck. On the Surprise, that's the deck towards the stern. That's the province of just officers and those steering the ship. So if I was a French sharpshooter during the Battle of Trafalgar, I'd want to be on a fighting top, and I'd look for the guy with the biggest hat and the most medals, and I'd do my best to take him out. And sadly, for those of you who are fans of British history, that's what happened to Lord Nelson. A French sharpshooter shot him on the quarterdeck. He was fatally wounded. He was taken down below decks where he lingered for a few hours. He was told he had won a great victory, and he finished by saying, "Kiss me hard." Before that, he said, "Thank goodness I have done my duty." And before the battle, Nelson set up a series of signals via a flag to his whole fleet to encourage them. Does anybody know what he said?
Yes.
Exactly. And that's that phrase, duty again. England expects that every man will do his duty. It was the signal that Lord Nelson had put on his flagship to convey the sense of urgency and duty to the entire fleet. When you watch Master and Commander, if you remember, they talk about doing your duty. There's a scene in the captain's cabin where they talk about how Lord Nelson so proclaimed duty. Going through my tactics, there's one of boarding. So once you have fired away your broadsides, if you're able, you want to come alongside the ship and board them with a boarding party and take that ship as a prize. Finally, I refer to false flag. And false flag is really not for fleet actions, but for individual actions. So when ships were sailing at sea, they could be out on station for weeks or months on end. They didn't always fly flags because the sun and the seawater would wear away that flag. But if you sighted another ship, you're expected to raise a flag. What some captains did is if they saw a ship and they wanted to try and approach it and take it, instead of putting up their flag, they would put up the flag of another nation, a neutral nation, wait until their opponent got closer, and then raise their true colors, and then fire. It was considered bad form to fire on your opponent until you had dropped your false flag and put up your true colors. Yeah,
One thing that you didn't say,
please.
the tactic of allowing the French and Spanish fleet to be in a line while you were coming perpendicular to them was very risky because you allowed them to do something called capping the T. They would allow them to cap the T. In other words, they could have their whole broadside.
Crossing the
All
T.
you had was the bow pointing at them. So they could rake your bow with their broadside until you cut through the line.
And
that was one of the things. He was risking his fleet by doing that, but he was confident that they could outrun him.
first of all, thank you for that. I'm going to make lots of mistakes, so please speak up and correct me. It won't hurt my feelings at all. I have thick skin. But to your point, Nelson was so confident of his captains, he called them his band of brothers after that Shakespeare line. And these smoothbore cannon were notoriously inaccurate until you got pretty darn close. So he was reasonably comfortable, and also the French had been on shore and they were not nearly as practiced as the British sailors. So he was fairly confident he could go down. And finally, the bow was not nearly as dangerous as the stern. The stern was flat with all these nice windows for ease of entry of cannonballs. The bow was curved and not quite as interesting, but yes, he was taking a huge chance.
I had another quick comment.
Yeah.
The captain of the ship that Nelson went by and he was shot from emphasized marksmanship from the tops. He trained his marksmen to be dead shots, even with the muskets, because you're only shooting about 70 to 80 feet if you're on the first top. So it was the wrong ship to go alongside.
At the wrong time.
At the wrong time, because he's not just that, but his cannons too, but especially the sharpshooters were trained especially to take out officers.
I have a feeling one or two people here are familiar with the Battle of Trafalgar, but that's just me. So here I've advanced to a slide of Patrick O'Brien. He's the author of the Aubrey Maturin series. Our surprise comes from his third novel in the series. The original surprise was based upon a French frigate, the Léonie, built in 1794 and captured in 1796. Patrick O'Brien wrote 20 novels. There was another novel after that. He got about halfway through and he passed away. Patrick O'Brien was on board the Surprise in 1995 to promote his 18th book, The Commodore, and he made some comments to the effect that if they painted the Surprise in the 1805 colors, she would very closely resemble the Surprise of his books. The last line here is Lord Cochrane. I put him in here because he's a wonderful, real-life, colorful figure in the British Navy, and I'm going to talk about him a little, but he influenced in large part some of Patrick O'Brien's books. So one of the battles that Lord Cochrane was involved in was his ship, the HMS Speedy, a brig, took on a Spanish frigate. I'm going to talk about that in a couple more slides, but that was a heroic battle, but that appeared in the first book of O'Brien's series, Master and Commander. And it's been 20 or 30 years since I read that for the first time, and I can still remember the vividness of that description of that battle. In the book, it was the Sophie versus something else. In real life, it was Lord Cochrane's Speedy versus El Gamo. Other things Lord Cochrane did is he would use a decoy to deceive pursuing enemies, like throwing a barrel over the back of the boat at nighttime with a lantern on it. Lord Cochrane had a lifelong friendship with his ship's surgeon, same as Lucky Jack Aubrey and Dr. Maturin. Lord Cochrane was dialed into the importance of prizes. He got 100,000 pounds in prizes, and back then, that was a lot of money. In the books, Captain Jack Aubrey is called Lucky Jack because he was very good at taking prizes initially in his career. And and I'm going to talk more about prizes in a minute, but when a captain takes a prize, his entire crew benefits. Lord Cochrane, when he was only in command of HMS Speedy, captured or destroyed 53 ships. He was known as the Sea Wolf. Yeah.
Just a note, the very first book before the Aubrey Maturin series is called The Golden Ocean. And on the Golden Ocean, Cochrane is actually in command of the squadron that sails around the Cape Horn and intercepts the Spanish fleet. And a lot of that 100,000-pound prize was taken from the Spanish fleet as they were leaving the Spice Islands that Jim talked about last week.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Did he use two spellings for his name? O'Brien?
No, it's probably me. It's probably user error. It's O-B-R-I-A-N.
Because I thought I read that it was sometimes portrayed as a different spelling.
Oh, then you know more than me, which is no surprise.
He made it up. It wasn't even his name.
Yeah.
His name was Russ. Patrick O'Brien is a nom de plume.
So there was some talk about press gangs and how they were used to recruit, or not recruit, but get people into the service. I have a feeling Lord Cochrane didn't have that problem. I was able, through Dr. Google, to pull up a recruitment poster from Lord Cochrane, and I'm not sure if all of you can read it, so I'm going to read the salient parts. God Save the King. Spanish dollar bag. Consigned to Boney, that's Napoleon Bonaparte. My lads, the rest of the galleons with the treasure from La Plata are waiting half-loaded at Cartagena for the arrival of those from Peru at Panama. As soon as that takes place, they are to sail for Portobello to take in the rest of their cargo with provisions and water for the voyage to Europe. They will stay at Portobello a few days only, and here's my favorite part. Such a chance perhaps will never occur again. What they're referring to, if you remember our talk from last week, is these Spanish galleons were loaded with silver and gold, and if you could take these Spanish galleons as prizes, you would share in that money. So while some ships in the Royal Navy use press gangs, I wonder if Lord Cochrane ever had to use them. So we talked about prizes, so let's just talk a little bit about a prize ship, because this was very important. First of all, the ship had to be captured legally, whatever that meant. They were sent to a prize court, condemned as a lawful prize. They were then sold at auction. The hull, the rigging, the guns, the stores, and perhaps most importantly, the cargo. How was the money divided? The captain got a quarter, the officers got a quarter, the petty officers and crew got 3/8. This is why Lord Cochrane had his recruitment poster out there. Spanish gold consigned to Boney, come help us get it. The admiral of the fleet would get 1/8.
Question?
Yeah.
There were two ways to do a prize, and you're describing one of them. That's if you sold it. But if you wanted to take it into your navy, then the admiralty awarded a certain amount of money based on the value of the ship, and that's what went to the crew. They didn't actually sell it, and so surprise, the Udite was taken into the British Navy.
My understanding, and I may be incorrect, my understanding is when you captured a ship, it had to be taken to a prize court. And the British, you're right, they took it into their navy, and that's how you got your money.
In that case, there was an assessment made by the admiralty,
Right.
and that money was then given to the crew for what they did.
Correct. All right. I think we're saying the same things, but anyway. Going to the movie, when they're about to board, when Russell Crowe is about to board the French frigate, he says a line, for England, for home, and for the prize. And I thought that was telling.
I thought he said for surprise. Thank you for correcting that. I thought he said for surprise.
It may have been for the surprise. I thought he said for the prize.
I like yours better.
I like mine better too.
One question about the divvying up. Where's the king's portion? I'm sure he gets plenty of it.
I didn't see that.
Probably takes it off the top. Maybe.
That was the Spanish, the King's That's the Spanish deal.
But there were complications to these prizes. If another ship was in sight, they would have a claim to share in the prize, even if they didn't actually capture the ship. So there could be lawsuits, but a British seaman at that time could earn several years' wages if you successfully took a prize. So there was a strong incentive to get these prizes.
Yeah, quick question. Did
Yeah.
they take prisoners or did they?
Oh yeah. And we're going to talk about that in this next frame, so thank you for the preview. So this is one of my favorite naval stories from that time of age of fighting sail. It's the capture of El Gamo by Lord Cochrane. So he was in command of a brig of 14 guns with 54 men. He had already depleted his crew, sending them off on other prizes, because when you captured a ship, you had to put a prize crew on the ship to sail it to a port. The El Gamo was a 32-gun frigate with 318 men. She had 8 and 12-pounder guns and 24-pound carronades. A carronade is a sort of a shortened gun. It can fire a larger load but a shorter distance. So he wasn't flying a flag at the time, and the Spanish ship hove into view. They fired a cannon, so he put up, not an English flag, he put up an American flag. He waited for them to get close. They fired a broadside, they missed. He got even closer. He angled his guns up, and he double or treble shotted a broadside at the Spanish frigate. He got lucky. That first broadside killed the captain and killed the boatswain. I forgot to mention the weight of shot. We were talking about how much a broadside would weigh. Gamo's broadside was 190 pounds. Speedy, 28 pounds. So not quite the same. They went through several escapades where they would close each other. Speedy would fire her guns, killing crew. The Spanish would try to depress their guns, but they couldn't depress them low enough to hit the hull. All they could do would be to punch holes through the sail. Eventually, he pulled up alongside and he divided his men into two groups. One group put black gun suit on their face, and he told them to board at the front, so they all went charging and boarded the front of the boat. The Spanish on board rushed to get them. He left his ship's surgeon in charge of the ship, and every other able-bodied man, when the Spanish were all up front, boarded the middle of the ship, and the Spanish were being attacked from both sides. Lord Cochrane, at this point, looked down at his surgeon and said, "Send the rest of the boarders over." He also told one of his crewmen to drop the Spanish flag. That's traditionally deemed a sign of surrender when you drop your ship's flag. The Spanish, having seen their captain killed and seen the flag being dropped, thought they had surrendered, so they all surrendered. The British very quickly herded the men on deck, below deck. They took some of the cannons and pointed over the hatch so that if they wised up, they'd be facing cannons when they came up. The Spanish second in commander was so embarrassed by this that he asked Lord Cochrane to mention something favorable to him. And so Lord Cochrane in his dispatches said that he conducted himself like a true Spaniard. Something to think about. And I want to go over the highlights of this. So the Speedy suffered 3 killed and 9 wounded. The Gamo suffered 14 killed, 41 wounded, and wait for it, 261 captured. Like I said, one of my favorite stories from the Age of Fighting sail. And I hope you liked it too. Yeah?
You mentioned carronade. When I was studying this Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson had 32-pound carronades on some of the bows of some of his ships.
68.
Swivel guns. And when he passed that capital ship of the Napoleon fleet, that carronade put a 32-pounder through the transom and killed over 200 people.
The advantage of raking when you can fire through the stern. Thank you for sharing that. For those of you who want the details, yes, the carronade was a sort of a shortened gun, could fire a massive load. Do you know, was that a canister shot or was it a round shot?
It was a hard ball.
Okay.
Because that would carry.
Yeah.
It went all the way through the deck, like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right through that deck.
If you fired a canister out of a 68-pound carronade, it had 500 musket balls, and one was stopped a boarding attempt during Trafalgar. You get 500 musket balls coming at you, and you're not going to.
That'll make you rethink things, won't it?
Change your attitude for sure.
Okay, so we talked about press gangs, and these were a way for the British to involuntarily increase the size of their navy, and they needed it during these Napoleonic Wars. A press gang was typically formed by a naval officer and several seamen. They would board ships, they would scour the waterfront. The law supported these press gangs. Once you were on board a ship, once you were shanghaied, if you will, you were subject to naval law. It's estimated anywhere from 10 to 50% of the Royal Navy was impressed sailors. But it was a sore point. It was a sore point with the colonies. In fact, it was such a sore point that it appeared in no less a document than the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to read to you the clause that was in the Declaration of Independence, objecting to impressment. He, being King George, has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. So clearly not overly popular with the colonies. For the War of 1812, the practice of the British impressing American sailors was another reason for that war.
Simon, another real quick one. Another way to get guys in your service is judges in jails. Because the judge might say, okay, you can spend 3 years in my jail, or you can go with Captain so-and-so on his ship. So they got a lot of guys out of jails that were put in prisons. They weren't the best guys in the world.
Thank you. So when you, for those of you who read the Patrick O'Brien books, or if you've seen the Hornblower series, one of the goals, in addition to taking prizes, is to get promoted to post captain. So let's talk a little bit about that. If you were in command of a ship in the Royal Navy, you were addressed as captain irrespective of your actual rank. Once you became a commissioned captain, you'd be on shore on half pay. Once you got posted to a ship, your name was put in the London Gazette, and you were considered a post captain. The junior post captains would command the 5th and 6th rate ships. The more senior post captains would command the larger ships. And curiously, in the Royal Navy, you would automatically advance by seniority. So if you could avoid death or disgrace, you could rise all the way up the ranks in the Royal Navy. Perhaps at some point in time you could even be the ruler of the Queen's Navy, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. I have a question in the back, yeah.
What would happen if the captain's name is at the top of the list, but there is no ship promoted? There's still captains coming up. So is he forced to retire if there's no more steps up, or?
I think if the people above him have passed away, I think he gets promoted to admiral. That's why you advance by seniority.
That's what I mean. Like, there isn't an open admiral's billet. Nobody's died. But there's still lieutenants promoting post captain.
Oh, nobody moves forward I don't think anybody moves forward just based on time. It's not like every year you go up a notch. When there's 5 people that die or vacate, then everybody moves up 5. If nothing happens for the next 2 years, nobody moves.
So you just have years that you've never, that no lieutenant was.
No promotions. Yeah, I mean, enough people died, there was always some movement, but yeah, they only moved forward. They only advanced if there was a vacancy.
And you didn't necessarily make captain. Lieutenants could spend the rest of their life, or even as midshipmen. There were people that were midshipmen in their 30s and 40s. They never passed the lieutenant exams.
And another question there?
Actually, more of a comment. One of the big differences with the Army and the Navy was the Army operated at the time on a purchase system where you could purchase your way up in rank. Typically, it was a lot more successful than it sounded, just due to the fact that officers would kind of police their own. If there was a wealthy officer who was incompetent, he would be quietly encouraged to sell his commission and get out of the Army. The Navy, they had the seniority-based system, which pretty successful, but also had the drawback, like they were saying, a lot of guys would not get promoted with language on half pay. The East India Companies, Armies, and Navy, they had the same seniority-based system. They would have issues where you have lieutenants who would be in their 40s and 50s and could not promote. No one was getting killed, no one was retiring, nobody was aging out. So they both had their share of drawbacks.
You're looking at next year's speaker, folks.
Hey, Simon, also, the infamous Captain Bligh from the Bounty was only a lieutenant. That's right. The kind of immunity. He did not have his captain's.
But because he was in command of a vessel, he was addressed as captain.
They called him Captain Bligh, but he's only a lieutenant.
But he did end up an admiral.
Yeah, later
he
on.
went up through the ranks.
Yeah. It's in the news.
So, some other ranks in the Royal Navy. Landsmen would be those newly brought on board a ship with little or no skills. From there you progress to be an ordinary seaman. That means you had some skills, you knew what you were doing. Able seaman, you were considered proficient in doing those things that the crew of a ship needed to be done. From there, you went to warrant officers. They were warranted by a department of the Navy. They were crucial. They were the backbone of the ship. They ran the ship like the petty officers in the Navy here. You had a carpenter, a master, a boatswain, a gunner, and a purser were the major warrants. Petty officers were appointed by the captain, and they assisted the warrant officers. Midshipmen, and for those of you who have seen Master and Commander, there's a lot of midshipmen there. They were considered young gentlemen. They usually got there through influence. They were picked by the captain. They could have they had quarterdeck privileges, which meant they could go on the quarterdeck. Again, that was normally just the domain of officers. They would then, after a passage of at least 6 years, sit for the lieutenant's exam. And that hornblower series I told you, there's a wonderful episode about hornblower sitting for the lieutenant's exam. From lieutenant, you would promote to commander, and from commander to captain. And I also want to talk about the Marines. All these ships carried Marines, and they had their own tasks as well. They were there to provide security, prevent mutinies. They were sharpshooters. Again, these were the people who would be manning the fighting tops. If you were going to board a ship, they would lead the boarding parties. If you were being boarded, they would repel boarders. And finally, there was some mention to powder monkeys. And I find whenever I'm doing a tour and I've got some parents dragging around some 10 or 12 or 14-year-old kids, I'll look at them and I'll say, you know, you could have been employed on this ship, and I'll tell them the story about a powder monkey. For those of you who don't know, these were boys 12 to 14 or thereabouts. Many of them were recruited by the Marine Society, which was a charity at the time. They got somewhere around 500 to 600 young boys a year to go into the Navy. They were small and nimble, and they would go from the gun deck, run down 1 or 2 decks to the magazine, get satchels of powder, and run them back up to the guns. That's why they were called powder monkeys. When I'm doing my tours, I tell these young boys they could have been powder monkeys. So let's talk about our HMS Rose. She was acquired by 20th Century Fox for $1.5 million for the movie Master and Commander. Peter Weir directed that movie, and he had read all the Patrick O'Brien books. There's a clip of him on YouTube where he has a whole stack of the books with post-it notes in there. He was given a lot of artistic freedom to make the movie the way he wanted, and I think he did a good job at that. But the boat was on the East Coast, and it needed to be taken to the West Coast. Before it left, 20th Century Fox installed 2 new Caterpillar diesel engines, and a large fuel bladder was installed. Will Sofrin was about 21 at the time. He was one of the crew taking the boat from the East Coast to the West Coast, and he wrote a book called All Hands on Deck. If you haven't read it, it's a good read. He was paid $190 a week. He called the book The Voyage of the Damned.
Did he go through the Panama Canal, or did he go all
They went through the Panama Canal, and I don't want to have any spoilers, but in the book, some of the highlights were they got dismasted, and that's where the term all hands on deck come out. If you're on a ship standing watch and you're sleeping, the last thing you want to hear is all hands on deck, because that means you've got a serious problem and everybody's got to come up and see what's going on. In his book, he describes how during some heavy seas he was sent forward to do some sort of a safety check, and he went down into the lower hold at the front of the ship, and the wood members were flexing so much the water was coming in. My God, I'm out in the middle of the ocean, the bow's not keeping the water out. There was problems with the men's heads. Seems like boats always have problems with the heads. Well, they weren't unique here. The diesels became hydrolocked from improperly placed exhaust, but they fixed that. There was heavy seas that the bilge pumps could hardly keep up. Quarters got trashed. His book has numerous diagrams, comparison to life with the British frigate of the 1700s, and finally there was even some romance involved. So now, how can you not go and read the book? So the making of the movie, we have a gem here. His name's Al Sorkin. He was an extra in the movie. He very kindly sat down with me recently and has an hour presentation of his role in the making of the movie. There was a casting call in San Diego. He and 79 other people showed up for that casting call. Only 2 got picked. He spent 5.5 months of filming in Baja California. He told me that he was told he was going to be staying at a 5-star hotel. He thought that was great until he got to Mexico and realized it was based on a 20-star rating system. He also told me that the hotel was 20 stories, but they'd only finished the first 3 or 4 stories. They had to finish out 1 more story for all the crew extras. He was paid $100 a day and $200 a day when he appeared in the movie, when his filming actually got to the movie. Russell Crowe organized rugby matches for the crew members, and he bought supplies they could make their own sailboats. Al built his own boat. He called it Stern Chaser. Now, for those of you who don't know, a stern chaser is a cannon on the back of a ship designed to fire backwards towards those pursuing you. It's also the back of the ship. And I didn't ask Al this, but I often wondered, was he such a confident sailor that he named it Stern Chaser because everybody was going to be chasing his stern, or was he such a rotten sailor that he was going to be chasing everybody else's stern? I didn't ask him, and I don't intend to, but I want to take a minute to say thank you, Al, for all the time you spent with me and the information you gave to me. There was only 10 days of filming on the actual surprise. All those other scenes you see, the interior scenes, sorry, that's Hollywood.
I think there's also 2 YouTube videos about they built another ship on land, right? Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for the introduction. No, that's great. They built a replica of the surprise, and they actually had plans from when the original La Unique was captured. Somewhere they found the plans where they transformed the La Unique to a British frigate, and they used those plans when they were making this replica. This replica was built in 3.5 months. It was placed on a gimbal, that's the top picture, and then put into a 20 million gallon tank. Yes?
It's the same set where they made Titanic in Baja, California. My sister was in charge of all the kids on the set. She was the studio teacher.
That's correct. It's the same tank they used for the filming of the Titanic. Oh, need to go back just one. Sorry about this, kids, but so there's a storm sequence where they have the replica sitting on this gimbal, and it's rolling and rocking and going all around and going from side to side. For those of you with a period interest, there's some poor sod at the front doing his business sitting on one of the heads. It's in the scene going right around the Cape Horn, so go back and watch the movie for that if nothing else. But what I found fascinating is there was a replica of the Endeavour, Captain Cook's boat, that went around Cape Horn, and they took video of that. They used that video, digitally enhanced it, and put it in the background of the replica for going around the Cape Horn scene. So, yeah.
Now, Al has done a presentation to us in the past about his experiences on the movie, and he told us one thing, that tower there is where they had the water tanks for the storm scenes, and the original, when they did the Titanic, gigantic electric fans blew the water down on the model in the tank to look like they're in a fierce storm. Well, the director of Master and Commander said that doesn't look fierce enough, so he bought DC-10 jet engines and put them up on the tower. So in the storm scene, jet engines are blowing the water on the ship model.
And Al shared with me how pleasant that was. He thought in America they would not have been allowed to run engines like that wide open, but in Mexico, no problem. And yes, maybe we can get Al to come back here and do his presentation, because it really is wonderful.
Simon, that was no problem.
The Endeavour actually came to the museum years ago. It was here about 15 or 20 years ago. He came to visit the museum.
Let's talk briefly about the movie. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. It won 2, Best Cinematography, Best Sound Editing. It's historically accurate, and I say sort of, because in the movie he's chasing a French frigate. In actuality, in the book, it was an American frigate. In the movie, they say this French frigate was built in America. That's nonsense. The French were building wonderful ships. There was no need to go to America. The reason it was a French frigate is because they thought American audiences wouldn't like it too much if a British ship was chasing an American ship. and got the better of the American ship. I refer to that scene with the one-armed midshipman. Again, this is the focus on Nelson. In the movie, a young midshipman lost his arm, one of his arms, and Lucky Jack Aubrey comes up to him with a book of Nelson. Nelson lost an eye and lost an arm in battle. And in the book, there's a picture of Nelson with his sleeve pinned to his right sleeve pinned to his shirt because he no longer has a right arm. And he gives it to that young midshipman. There's also that scene in the captain's cabin where they're all toasting Lord Nelson as the only hope to stop Bonaparte from invading England. The movie was shot with a $150 million budget, and it made $212 million at the box office, so it did fairly well. I wish to heck there'd been a sequel, but for whatever reasons there isn't. We're going to talk briefly about Bonaparte, because, again, he was featured in the movie. He was the master of large parts of the coast, master of large parts of Europe. He had amassed 200,000 people on the coast to invade England. But he didn't rule so much at sea. Nelson was his nemesis. This was during the Napoleonic Wars, a series of wars between 1803 and 1815, involving the French on the one hand and a shifting series of coalitions of nations on the other. This was his nemesis, Nelson. I'm just going to talk briefly about him because we talked about him a lot already. But here are three battles he was involved in. The Battle of the Nile was where Napoleon went to Egypt. The French lined up all their ships on the shore in a bay, had all their guns pointing out to seaward and thought they were fine. Nelson came down with his band of brothers captains, split his ships into two lines. One line sailed on the seaward side of the French ships, and one line sailed on the landward side. It was a smashing victory for the British. 11 ships of the line of the French were destroyed, and it put paid to Napoleon's ambitions to take over Egypt. I mentioned the Battle of Copenhagen just for one reason. Nelson was involved fighting the Danish fleet. He thought he was doing rather well, but his superior thought he wasn't doing quite so well, so sent out a signal flag telling him to retreat and come back. Nelson thought he was doing better than that, and he took a telescope. He put it up to the eye that didn't see and said, "I don't see any signal telling us to retreat." He continued and won, so that was good for him, but hence the expression turning a blind eye. You may have heard of that. The Battle of Trafalgar, we've gone over that in depth. There's other nautical phrases, but I'm not going to go into. There are 3 sheets to the wind, all kinds of nautical phrases. Some come from the age of sail. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite quotes from a British admiral when the British were concerned about invasion by the French. Admiral John Jervis, around 1803, made the following statement: "I cannot guarantee the French shall not invade. I can only guarantee they shall not come by sea," which I thought was just wonderful. So briefly, because we're getting a little short on time, how did they spend their time? Navigation, watchkeeping, holystoning the decks, which meant you took a piece of sandstone, threw some seawater on the decks, you rubbed the decks to remove the grime, the blood, the splinters, make them shiny and smooth. Gunnery drills, set, trim, and reef sails, wash your clothes, scrub your hammocks, Sunday services, ship's inspection by the captain. The Marines would drill with muskets, exercise reefing and furling. Oh, and they did drink. British sailors would get a gallon of beer a day. It's called small beer, 1.5 to 2.5%. When that ran out, they got rum, which was turned into grog, which was 1 part rum, 1 part water. That tradition continued until March 31st, 1970, where at 11 a.m. the British sailors had their last tot of rum. That was known as Black Tot Day, and they put black armbands on their arms to signify the end of that 300-year tradition.
Another thing about the rum is that the Admiral Vernon at the time, he knew that sailors were literally drinking themselves to death. So he put half rum and he made it less powerful, and the sailors were mad, so they called him Old Grog, and it became eventually grog was the rum and water mixture. Before that, they drink the straight stuff, and that was part of the reason was to just get rid of so much alcohol, which was ruining a lot of people's lives.
Thank you. So this
They got their Porsche was on the size of a small Dixie cup, a really small little cup. I've got a copper cup at home that I used to. It's a little bit of rum, not a lot.
you should have brought it today.
It's in my
So sounds good to me. So our surprise today is a dockside attraction only. She's in need of some serious prize money to get her back to fighting trim. Now I wanted to share with you, this is the end of my presentation, some lines from a play written by Gilbert and Sullivan. It's called HMS Pinafore. And the main character, Sir Joseph Porter, had become the first Lord of the Admiralty. There was just one problem. He'd never been to sea. He rose through bureaucracy, political connections, and paperwork. And for those who cannot see, the lines go, now landsmen all, whoever you may be, if you want to rise to the top of the tree, if your soul isn't fettered to an office stool, be careful to be guided by this golden rule. And then you see that line is repeated in parentheses, so the rest of the characters on the stage would repeat that line. And then it continues with Joseph Porter singing, stick close to your desks and never go to sea, and you all may be rulers of the Queen's Navy. So, you know, this has been kind of a group presentation, and I was kind of thinking, I'd like to invite Margaret and Doug and Ed and Gail, Jim, up front here. And we're going to be the lead singer, but you guys are all going to be the responding chorus. So your lines are the ones that are highlighted in yellow. Our lines are the ones in blue. All right, so my initial cast here, now landsmen all, whoever you may be, if you want to rise to the top of the tree, if your soul isn't fettered up a stool, be careful to be guided by this golden rule. Be careful to be guided by this golden rule. Close to your desk and never go to sea, and you will only be rulers of the Queen's Navy. Close to your desk and never go to sea, and you will only be rulers of the Queen's Navy. Thank you, everybody. Questions?
And there you have it.
Yeah.
You get a little more embedded in the HMS Rose / Surprise. Rick Wolf and Doug Phillipson will lead the walkabout on the Surprise. What time do you want to start?
5 minutes from now.
10 minutes from now. You have time for the bathroom. It is 5 minutes to 12, so 12:05. All docent trainees are welcome. Senior docents may accompany, but please stay in the back and be quiet so that the people leading the tours can impart their information. Thank you.